Biodiversity, and I will be moderating today's session on harnessing soil biodiversity for drought tolerance and soil health. And this is quite interesting. I should have kept the people who were here before because they were talking about nature positive solutions to address issues of drought and also enhance resilience. But due to several commitments, people have different ways of doing business. And I was successful because the person I was waiting for is also with us. So we are lucky. Otherwise, I was going to apply my creativity rush to get started. So I'm happy that you are with us. So everything I want to say, I will drop it because now you just arrived. So we will get a keynote speech from Rashid. He comes to us from ICADA. For all the speakers today, I will not give too much details about yourself, but I give all of you 30 to 60 seconds to tell us about really what you want us to know about yourself and your organization. For now, I can mention who you are and from where you come, but please make sure that you tell us who you are in more details, including your organization, but with the maximum of 60 seconds. Having said that, we will start with Rashid, who will give us the keynote speech. Then we will have a panel discussion, which for today, we talk about gender balance, but is a very, very gender balanced panel. So we will have Lee, who comes to us from C4 ICRAF, Chiesa, who comes to us from Ubuntu Alliance, Elizabeth, who comes from the Global Center on Biodiversity for Climate, the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew in the UK, and we'll have Deborah who comes to us from the University of Nairobi, and she's also a fellow at INRI. So today we have really been very positive in terms of being gender biased, but in a very, very positive manner. Having said that, let me hand over to Rashid. You have 15 minutes. Thank you. Your presentation is there. Rashid was told to share the presentation 48 minutes, 48 hours earlier. And it's now that he's getting the presentation to us. But it's okay, he's efficient. He knows that IT people can do a good job. And he's eating in his 15 minutes for sure. So yeah, as he looks now to his presentation, the few things I want to say before he came was that we have like 5 impact indicators on environmental health and biodiversity, and which all of them are related to soils. We want to see that the work you are doing, so if you have anything to share, and he's able to save his time. Here you are.
Sorry. Apologize because I was in another side event and we just ran in for me to come here. So I will go faster, quickly, to go to the main message of this. Thanks, Deborah. Thanks, our colleagues, for having this event, which is, I think, interesting because issues of soil and soil biodiversity is very important. So, yes, I will try to focus here on some indicators that we can improve if you adopt some regenerative practices, as we can give also some hope of the soil that are really degraded, and we want to see if we can make it more, can I say, healthy if we adopt this kind of practices. And I focus mainly on dry land here because dry land here, it's the main issues. And you know that we have more than 66% in Africa are dry land area. In the world, it's more than 40% dry land. So it's a very important issue. And you know that dry land, now there is paper saying that dry land normally, because we get more area under this aridity, there are also, if you find solution for this area, we can find solution for whole world. because they are also impacting the global climate issues in the world. But we need some characterization, and we need a lot of possibility to increase the potential of agriculture in this area if we regenerate soils in the regions. So, biodiversity, we are talking a lot. I will not go beyond here, but mainly it's coming through soil degradation, intensive practice, and also climate change as becoming here. There is some solution. There's several regenerative systems that can be tested, no-till farming, cover cropping, agroforestry. And here I mainly focus on one, it's conservation agriculture. There are others, but at least we will show you some data, some results that we obtained really from the field, and it was recently observed in this kind of dryland. For example, Morocco, we are facing 5th year of drought, which is never have been in the past, as one example. And I think this is making this area a hotspot at several areas in the world. But could we, using best practices, increase the water retention? 30% of water, we observe it, it's the reality. It's important for farmers. Whatever you can get of water and keep it in the soil, we call it green water. We are looking on this kind of practice that can increase the water availability. And I can also talk about biodiversity. I will not go beyond on the physical and chemical parameters. Here we start doing some collection of data. It's new, it's also time consuming, it's costly, but we start. For example, doing some work in the field to measure soil respiration, active carbon, organic matters. This kind of technique, we try to use it in the island area. And the first result that we observe, this is PhD student, we already observed that no-till or conservation agriculture organic matter increased after 7 years under can call it conservation agriculture. Soil respiration was also become higher. As you say, the statistically active carbon start to be also higher under this kind of practices, which is important to, but farmers are looking also to this parameter, carbon, mainly, can I say crop yield, because they don't care about carbon and things, but they want to see if you will also increase their yield and incomes. And we observe in dry year, plus 30% of increasing of crop yield. So also microbial activities at earthworm, we start recently a work on the long-term trial, 18 years. And we observe, also PhD student, that there is high biodiversity when you start doing this kind of study for side bacteria and fungi abundance. This is new, this publication showing that when you adopt technology, this kind of nature-based solution, you can have some enriching your soil profile in terms of bacteria and microbial biomass. And we are working now to identify this using the biotechnology approach. Earthworm also, this is under dry conditions. We noted that we have high earthworm. This is also a student that they are doing this work. Now we are doing the measurement and also classification of this earthworm to see which earthworm can support dry conditions. And we try to, to promote this under this practice of conservation agriculture. We look also to humic substance, which measure, and we observe that humic substances are high under conservation agriculture compared. For enzymatic activities, also this study we just published it during the last FAO event, and we show that under conservation agriculture, you can increase the biomass, and you see that enzymatic activities are higher compared to conventional system. This, for example, show that this kind of enzyme are higher, and this is very important to understand why yield start to be increased. And also the carbon stock, not carbon sequestration. Carbon stock sequestration is decade phenomena. Stock, we observe that under this practice, we increase the carbon stock in different layer compared to, this is answer under also this long-term trial that we have in this dryland. So I talk about water infiltration, and we increase carbon, you increase the capacity of soil to stock water, and this is very important in dryland. And finally, I can say that biodiversity are now in the agenda. We need to work mainly to make soil part of it. And we need that farmers also need to understand biodiversity. It's not only scientist issue. We need to explain them that their soil, when they start to be alive, they also increase and they can have some good products by the end, and their soil can survive. You see here that some effort need to be done to promote this kind of technology. And the key message here, soil biodiversity is important. You need to promote this kind of regenerative farming, and we need also to urgent action for also having this, stopping this degradation in dryland. By this, I come to the end of my presentation. I hope I am in the timing.
Yes, so if you can save microorganisms in dry land, I had no doubt that you can also save on time. So first of all, really congratulations, because it's amazing, useful information in a really very, very brief way of communicating. And that's what we want, what we call the elevator speech. And we appreciate that you have accepted one from one session to another. Having said that, let me call our panel discussion. And I think they are not using PowerPoint presentation. Feel free to sit among them, because during the discussion, we will be able to come back to what you just said. So feel free to join them. Then you can even assist me with the gender balance a bit. Yes, so we have Lee. She comes to us, as I said earlier, from C4 ICRAF, and we have to give her the floor. And Lee, I'd appreciate it. I know you will, please come. I know you will introduce yourself, but at least I have to recognize that you are one of our famous soil scientists globally wide, and this is highly appreciated. And I was telling them that my colleagues, that it does not come just randomly. The level of dedication is special. I don't think there are many people who are catching a flight in the next couple of hours who will be able to come and sit in a panel discussion. So highly appreciated. You will tell us more about yourself. Then also inviting Chiesa to join us. She's also the voice, she's a founder of many things, but the voice of farming community, but the modern farming community. So we will hear more from her, but representing the grassroots stakeholders. Then we get Elizabeth, who comes to us from the Global Center on Biodiversity for Climate. She will give us more details. For those who are not here and have missed the opportunity, she has two sets of slides. The first ones will be to tell us about the science they do in the area of soil health and biodiversity. But Lee, you will miss that one, but you will get her contact information. She will be also announcing a grant competition in the area that is also relevant to soil health and biodiversity and other aspects. Then we still to make sure that we keep the young generation motivated. And for that good reason, I'm inviting Deborah to join us for the panel discussion as one of the early career scientists joining us for the discussion. So having said that, I want to free the time of Lee, who's leaving very shortly. So Lee, you have 60 seconds to tell us who you are, then tell us about the science you do, and for the science you do in the area of the topic, you have like something like 6 minutes. And to do that, really what we want, we have seen the science, and I do believe you can add, feel free to add if you have any other indicators that we should be tracking that Rashid has missed. Please feel free, not missed, because he didn't have enough time to elaborate. So if you have something to add, that would be great. But what we need you the most is really how do we translate that science into policy decisions? The floor is yours.
First of all, how many events have we been to? And honestly, don't you wish Kargeli was moderating all of them? He is the best moderator. Let's give him a round of applause. I mean, I wish I would have been in your interview for your position because I'm sure it was just like this unanimous, like, go, you're amazing. So my name is Lee Winowicki. I'm a soil scientist and I'm the global research leader at C4E of Soil and Land Health. And Keith and I were just gossiping about this exciting new area of work in the new CGIAR science program on resilient soils, where we've actually committed to expanding the analysis of biology of the soil, including eDNA. So we're really pushing the CGIAR into new frontiers. And we were saying how we're going to fight together when they try to cut our budget. So I know this is being recorded. So one of the things so let me start here. So we always say that soil is the biologically active layer of the Earth's surface. Yet often, and myself included, we just focus on the chemical and physical aspects of soil because it's much easier to analyze. And for many of you who know me, we've been implementing the Land Degradation Surveillance Framework, which is a systematic monitoring framework for soil health, land degradation, and above ground biodiversity. We've implemented this framework across 45 countries across the last 2 decades. In the last 5 years, we finally started including arbuscule mycorrhizae fungi, bacteria-fungi ratio, and yes, and macrofauna. And finally, we got a SPUN grant to do some eDNA alongside this systematic methodology. And I'm not saying that these are the best indicators. I'm saying that what we're finding is in very degraded systems in India, even under currently no chemical practices, the AMF spores are still very few and very small because we're starting from such a degraded state. So I'm not depressed about that because over time, we should be able to increase the biological activity in these systems. So we've compared zero budget natural farming and conventional farming. And while we have more AMF spores in the zero budget, still not where we need it. And we're also doing this in rangelands. So we have no idea what the threshold of bacteria fungi ratio or AMF spores should be in rangelands. And that's okay. Oh, not really. Maybe we might not be okay. But what we're doing is we're building a data-driven approach where we're sampling across these landscapes, and we can now have regional thresholds to say, okay, in the Masai Mara Reserve compared to, a degraded rangeland, here's what we're seeing. So what my call is that we as scientists and we in the CG, because also in our area of work, we're proposing to expand the number of long-term trials, as well as include soil biology in existing long-term trials. Imagine if we could do that, right? Imagine. We would, yeah. So is to include more systematic monitoring approaches that also include soil biology. And I love the graph, and I took a photo. I'm going to zoom in of looking at I think those were eDNA results of looking at different community. Anyone who tells us we know all the species in the soil is absolutely kidding themselves. There's so much to explore. And I think it's a really exciting time where we got soil health on the agenda from the UN Food System Summit. I also represent the Coalition of Action for Soil Health. Now we need to make sure we're having a data-driven approach to really inform policy, inform practice, and inform these global agendas.
I knew that we were going to get this. So you really now have your time, you manage your time. When you feel that it's time for you to proceed, we appreciate it a lot. Yeah, so we have heard from the scientists in terms of the keynotes, the wealth of experience from Lee, especially really trying to see what kind of biological indicators we need to come up. I'm a soil scientist by training and did soil chemistry for good reason, because handling the microorganism, it takes a bit of skills. So thanks for everyone who does it. But getting those indicators is really very, very critical, especially when we talk about land degradation and restoration. How do we see the shift where we are taking actions and regenerating the biodiversity, the biology, or the source we need? I was in a session where people were complaining that, you know what, and the youth, especially the youth this morning, they say, scientists, you do your good job, you're proud, you celebrate, you publish, and so on. But farmers, we don't get it. So what I want to hear from Cheers is really, how much have you been able to benefit from this kind of high-level science, which is we appreciate a lot. The kind of challenges you face as a farming community, especially when you really want to maintain the soil biology, the soil biodiversity. How do you get access to that knowledgeable information, and what options could exist for things to work better? We will need to learn more about Ubuntu before you go into the details of what you do.
Perfect, thank you. So Ubuntu Alliance is a company that's focused on increasing access to information and data to businesses with the focus on the agricultural sector, and also collecting information and data from businesses to unlock alternative financing opportunities. So one thing I learned is that farmers don't speak finance, finance don't speak farmer, and they all don't speak nature or conservation. So there's a strong need to make people nature fluent. And it's been interesting, like at the session, there's a lot of, you can't do business on a dead environment. And if the soil is dead, then that affects, a lot of countries in Africa and Zimbabwe, my home country, our economy is based on agriculture. So if farmers aren't getting money, then how are we growing food that we need to sustain ourselves? Food security is national security. So there's a need to close the bottlenecks in facilitating the flow of finance to farmers, because without agriculture, you have no manufacturing. Without manufacturing, you have no tertiary industries. So where it's interesting, and I say that I am a reformed scientist because I realized that scientists are historically terrible communicators. And I say that as a scientist myself. My undergraduate thesis was looking at the antimicrobial properties of Lipia javanica against Staphylococcus aureus and E. coli in using different extraction methods. And I remember that I thought, you know what, I'm going to set up a tea company promoting African indigenous herbal teas in the UK market. And I entered this university competition. I got shortlisted and I got to the pitching stage. And I'm talking about all of these amazing things that the tea had, and it's got these polyphenols and it's got this and it's got these adaptogens, and this is how the tea interacts with your body at a multicellular level. And the judges asked me 2 questions after my 5-minute presentation. Number one, I just want to know, number 1, does it taste good? Number 2, what's the price? Ladies and gentlemen, this is where we need to start seeing how do we close this gap, because sometimes as soil scientists, as climate scientists, as different area experts, we are so high level. A farmer just wants to know, how does this affect my productivity? Will I get an increased yield? And what is the cost? So we need to bring it down, and every inefficiency is an opportunity. So we know that, on average, only about 5% of farmers globally get their soils tested. And as Lee highlighted, most farmers, we've been focusing on the chemistry of soil. We now need to look at how do we integrate the biodiversity of the soil. And I get excited about market-based mechanisms such as the UNFCCC Article 6, which focuses on carbon, the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, because as an entrepreneur, as an innovator, I'm like, okay, so government is missing this data. These people are willing to pay for ecosystem services. How do you bring all of these pieces together to create incentives to enhance soil testing, enhance access to data? And once you can measure something, you can monetize it. I know most researchers in the room are going to say, no. But I'm like, no, let's leverage these market-based mechanisms to incentivize behavioral change, incentivize private sector to come in and aggregate those data requirements. Imagine if at no cost to the farmer, a carbon project developer now comes in and says, we're going to, this is our baseline. We want to reach this. We're measuring your soil organic carbon. We're measuring your microbial activity in the soil, it feeds into your National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan, your NDCs. Farmers are facilitating their payment for ecosystem services because the data is there. They can now get access to nature finance, climate finance, and you start to create a holistic loop. And I think we now need to really think about a systems approach on how do we get people paid, how do we facilitate financial flows, and how do we incentivize alternative behavior? And in all of this, you need foot soldiers. So when I look at the green economy, especially in Africa, the potential for job creation, forget about the carbon credits and the biodiversity, we can argue about it. I'm like, once you have a whole industry formalized, and you look at the amount of field agents we need, because biodiversity monitoring is very localized, how many jobs is that? What is the increased tax revenue? So maybe we need to start focusing on different aspects and say, how do we leverage market-based mechanisms to have positive environmental and social outcomes? Healthy soils, healthy people, healthy productive people, decreased burden on the health system. So that's a different way of looking at it. I can talk until the cows come home, but thank you for that.
Yeah, now we can get the other microphone to Elizabeth. But before I get there, there is a few things that I really retain. Yes, we have these solutions, but it's critical to get the means for implementation. How do you make sure that the farmers have the means to implement the solutions we are proposing? And it's my understanding, in fact, I was listening to you, I could have been lost if I was in the jury when you were presenting for the award. So I like the guy who say, but does it taste good? And how much does it cost? I think that's what people tell us, that the plain language as we communicate science is very, very critical. But what I love really behind the story is no farmer is going to follow us if we say do ABC because we want you to improve the soil biology. No one is going to follow us. I agree with you. What they want is how can we package our science in such a way that we get development indicators that make them happy in terms of improving yield, in terms of improving income, while those processes result in terms of building the soil biology, the soil carbon, and so on. Let alone once the things work well, you can say this is the secret behind the increase your productivity, the increase of your income. But they can't be the entry point. So we got the message, and I think we will be able to build on that. Let alone after listening to others, I'll come back to you, Chiesa, in terms of really elaborating a bit further about the carbon credit market, really what it means for majority of our farmers. That goes along with the payment for ecosystem services, but that is after we have listened to others. So coming to this, Elizabeth, you have been listening. They have talked about the indicators, the good science they do, and how this could happen in the farmer conditions. And sometimes, today we are based here, we are here, seated in Riyadh, and we are talking about really things that matter at the global level. If I go and start talking about my village, maybe many people will not listen to me because they are trying to find really global solutions. But we know those global solutions will have to be adapted at the local level. So based on your work experience, and so really what do you see as the potential innovation, shift in innovation systems, innovation gaps to make sure that the high science we are doing in terms of building soil biology and so on could really respond to the needs we have at the local level, as Chiesa was telling us.
Okay, thank you, Kargili. I'm Elizabeth Warren. I'm a plant scientist, not a soil scientist, but my PhD was related to a pathogen that did survive in the soil for part of the year. I work in the Royal Botanic Gardens of Kew, but I lead a team on the Global Centre on Biodiversity for Climate. So just picking up one point on the myriad of fungi and microorganisms that were mentioned, the Royal Botanic Gardens of Kew works with other partners globally, and they have a State of the World conference every couple of years. And in the most recent version of that, they were working with scientists trying to understand the scale of fungi globally. And they reckon there's 2.5 million fungal species, but only 155,000 of those have actually been identified. So there's still a lot of work to do in that area. That's just one point I wanted to make. In terms of the Global Centre on Biodiversity for Climate, going back to your mention of we need systems, we need to look at things in terms of the whole system and the value chain. That's the focus of the GCBC, and encourages projects to both look at an issue holistically, but bringing in inter and transdisciplinary research. So it is working with those farmers and smallholders to understand what their demands are, what their systems are, but then working with them, bring in that scientific knowledge and understanding that we have. And I'm glad to see the CGIAR is working on that. I started my career in CIMMIT but yeah, and then it was just focused on breeding, and it was just getting into the early days of bringing in some of the systems thinking, the conservation tillage, which is also an area that the UK has been quite strongly involved in. We have the Rothamsted Experimental Station, 174 years of experiment with soil samples collected from each of those years in a bank. So yeah, very, very useful. But going back to GCBC, we're looking at sort of 6 elements. One is demonstrating what works and how it works, where it works, with whom and why, and then building capacity with the partners that are involved in the projects, particularly the beneficiaries, but also bringing in governments and officials so that they see for themselves the evidence of what is working. And then it's identifying what is best practice and being able to articulate that. And then it's having the evidence and sharing that with policymakers, but in an accessible format, because having worked in government too, policymakers don't have a lot of time. They need something that is really simple. A 2-page brief with a clear facts is what they will look at, but nothing else. And you have to make sure that you can articulate that in an appropriate format. And then what the program is trying to seek is more transformative change, so that if we know what works in the field in India, and we can take that, the methodologies, the approach, but adapt it to the local context in other regions of India, but also take it to other countries more globally. So that's the ethos of the GCBC. A tall order, but.
Yeah, thank you very much. In fact, let alone, and that's also applies to everyone. As I gave the homework to Sheza in terms of telling us about how the carbon credit and payment for ecosystem services work. Definitely, as you said, there is the knowledge transfer from a certain level to another. And one of the things I vary a lot is really the cross-regional learning, cross-location learning within countries. These are some of the things that we really need to invest in. For all the panelists, one of the things, building on the point that Elizabeth just made, at the moment, I want to come back to all of you and try to find what needs to be improved in our investment systems so that we can be able to improve the knowledge sharing, knowledge transfer situation. So think about it before you get back to you on this one. I will first give the floor to Deborah. She's coming to us from the University of Nairobi. She can and rightly claim that she's an early career and young scientist as she's completing a PhD. You have been able to listen to those who have started probably a bit earlier than you in this area in terms of what they have been doing in the field, how things are working, and the kind of challenges we are facing to get that knowledge from the laboratories to the field, especially making sure that the farmers are doing it. And I can disclose that you come from somewhere in Nairobi, so you know what arid regions are also. It gives you an idea. So we want really to hear from you, really based on your recent experience, and especially being regular in the field with your fellows and others. What do you see as opportunities and challenges of applying most of the science you just said from your your fellows in this area and apply it? And what kind of challenges as young scientists you face in terms of making sure that you can make it happen? Thanks.
My name is Deborah Mungina from the University of Nairobi. I'm in my second year in my PhD studies in management of agroecosystems and the environment. My research is on, I'm assessing the role of soil biodiversity on soil health among smallholder farmers in Deya, Kiambu County. It's a semi-arid area. So let me start with the challenges. As we have heard that soil biodiversity plays a key role in building resilience to drought. Yeah, and it enhances soil health. That is by enhancing water retention. It also soil microbial organisms. They play a key role in promoting nutrient cycling. We have rhizobium, we have Absicilla mycorrhiza. Then it also enhances plant health. So as a young scientist, early career scientist, we face challenges like getting funding to be able to go carry out research. Sometimes the area you're looking at, as we have listened to our panelists, this is it's getting interest now. Earlier, we used to focus on the chemical properties, the physical properties. So you can start research in this area, but you fail to get funding because that's not the interest of most people. But it's now getting interest, and yeah, I'm glad that I'm also getting funding to be able to carry out my research, but we need to invest more in such. And for opportunities, as an early career scientist, this is a very exciting frontier. And researchers, like PhD students, can use tools like metagenomics. That is an exciting area. Rashid talked about it, about RNA. This looks at it enables us to be able to understand the soil microbial dynamics under drought conditions. And then we can also develop and test innovative solutions that promote beneficial soil organisms. Another opportunity is researching on collaborating across different disciplines. This can bring about integrated solutions that can link soil health, climate smart agriculture, and drought tolerance. Also, partnerships are very critical. If universities are able to partner with research centers, with government sectors, with private sectors, this provides opportunities and avenues for networking and funding and mentorship for early career scientists. Yeah, thank you.
I will build on that point because when Elizabeth was speaking, we realized the critical need of knowledge transfer from one region to another, from one location to another. But one aspect that is also really very critical, and you said it very well, Deborah, is how do we enhance also the collaboration with academia? Different institutions, different investment, different equipment, different infrastructure in terms of really implementing the quality of the science we want. How do you make sure that we have that kind of mapping that allows us to know who's working on what and how can we strengthen the collaboration? I think when Elizabeth, we announced the grant competition, we see whether there are some opportunities in that area, but really the collaboration and exchange is something that we really need to see the best way to develop on this. I'll come back to the panelists for things I have promised. But yes, I think you have a long list of them. One is really sharing us more insights in terms of the carbon market and how really that works in the reality of farmers. It's sometimes interesting in the reality of the governments for fundraising, but in terms of the farmers, what does it mean? Yesterday, I was making a speech somewhere and I said that, I don't know where I got the statistics, but I used it, that there is only 2% of the investment for agricultural research that ends in the hands of the farmers. How can we change that situation? Is something that we will want to hear from you. And from the other three, it will be really try to see what needs to shift in terms of investing in the agricultural research, especially when we think about soil health. You still have time to think about it, but now I want to really to turn over to the audience and see if there is anything that you would like to not only to ask to the panelists, but if you have also an experience in the area of soil health and making sure that it's being adopted at farm level and what needs to be done differently. So feel free to share your experience. If you think there is something you want to know from the panelists, you can put it in the form of a question. But if you want to share your experience, please do. Yeah, please go ahead.
It's not a personal experience. It's just something that I've had in the course of the week in terms of soil biodiversity. The whole idea of it's getting critical attention, not just within these conferences, but globally. So in a side event at the IUCN Pavilion, they talked about they're starting to include soil biodiversity in their, their red list of some of the threatened species. And I don't remember the exact number, but you can look it up. But I think it's something important and nice, and I thought it was worth mentioning. Thanks, Kekela.
You keep the microphone because I made the mistake that, as you know, the panelists, they have told us where they come, who they are, and where they come from. You can do the same thing, then they will be very happy. Please
Thank you very much. My name is Christine Magaju. I work with the World Agroforestry Center based in Nairobi, and I work at the intersection of science and practice. So this is very exciting for me.
Great, thank you. Any other comment from, yes, please.
Thank you. I am Veronique, teachers from Cameroon, but we are Francophone, so we are just realized that the side event is very interesting. We want just, if someone in the panel can summarize in French what those scientific knowledge that we heard. Thank you.
Yes, I think Rashid, he works in Morocco, so he can summarize it. Oh, you want to summarize, sir?
No. I just want to also to ask a question.
Yes, please go introduce yourself, ask your question. But before you go, yes, I promise we will give a brief summary for something like 5 minutes at the end of the session. Thanks.
Okay, she is also my sister. We are coming, all of us from Cameroon. But I'm trying to speak in English. So my question is to my friend, to you. You say that let's say nature has a different system against drought. If things are like that, why do we need again all this work on transformation of the soil? That's my question. Thank you.
Any other question from the audience or comment? Okay, that's okay. We can come back to the panelists. Do you want to go for the question in terms of? No, there is a question in terms of the summary. We will do it towards the end. There are a lot of things to summarize.
Thank you. Your question is, I think, important because we need to clarify something. Yes, normally can I say nature can, if you can under some shock like drought or like it can be resilient. You can find some resilience in some system, but the time is our enemy. That's why if you want to be faster in terms of be more resilient, you need to adopt such as practice that we know soon. We know that under research work, there is a lot of solutions that are proposed, but still not achieving to farmers. So what we need to do now is the last mile when we have to work closely with community to show them this kind of practice. I give the example of CA, conservation agriculture. Morocco work on conservation agriculture 13 years, 30 years. But the adoption was very low. It was since last 4 years, it was around 20,000 hectares, which is less than 1% of the agricultural land. But when you go to decision makers with new strategy, we're saying, guys, we don't have time. This technology needs to fly. They put it in the new strategy in Morocco, and now for 2013, we need to reach to 1 million hectares. This is really something important because we need to work with farmers to share with them this kind of knowledge, like we do with rotation, that's something that we know, but it's not well adopted. And I think we need to help nature to come back to the way how we have our soil before. And that's we need to work with community and partnership if you want to see some impact on the ground. I hope that I answer your question.
Yes, so we agree that solution exists, but the way you have it in terms of the knowledge product is not necessarily the same way that is being implemented on ground. And that's a good introduction to really what I want them to share, what needs to shift in terms of the investment in the sector. And talking about my 2%, and what can we do at least to move from 2% to 10% and at least for the smallholder farmers? Then they can get the innovations. Otherwise, you can talk to them, but if they don't have access to the right resources to do this, I don't want to start talking about things that I don't know. The panelists are here to share. So, Chiesa, if you can take the microphone and share with us really more insights about the carbon market credits and the payment for ecosystem services. And how do you think we can innovate to operationalize that in the farmers' field so farmers can benefit the most from that?
Perfect. Thank you. So I'm actually going to say that the longest running soil organic carbon project was actually launched in Kenya, the Kenya Carbon Markets Project. And I think it's turning 10 years now. It started in 2014. And this is where we need to leverage off our different strengths. When you look at the carbon markets, they were born from the UN Convention on Climate Change. And there is a market-based mechanism under Article 6 where companies or countries that have made climate commitments, you know, if you're a bank in New York, you can have energy efficient lights, you can have a cycle to work scheme, incentives for people to use public transport, but you're always going to emit more than you can sequester. So the people looking around, and then, you know, the solution was a market-based mechanisms that for what you cannot mitigate against, you can offset. And this now provided a market-based mechanism of facilitating flow of money to people that were able to make changes in their business practices, in their operations, in the way they build, so that they could leverage low carbon technologies, but being funded and compensated by companies that would then, so almost like, okay, I save a ton of CO2 here and you have too much, so we're going to make that exchange. So in a nutshell, that's how the carbon markets work, that people that have the capacity to offset can now be compensated for it. And it's very complicated, especially in the African context, because we don't have a word for carbon. So how do you explain something when you don't even have a word to represent it? And, you know, we've seen very interesting things, and it's not just smallholder farmers. My father is a farmer. He's a commercial farmer, studied agriculture, did his master's in agriculture. And when I was explaining to him the concept that, oh, you know, Dad, there's this, you know, this thing called the carbon markets. There's 170 different carbon project methodologies. And, you know, maybe we can, you know, put it into your business, your farming proposal, so that you can unlock money. And my father, you know, he listened to me, and after a while, he's like, Chiedza, you're telling me people in Europe are buying air. And this isn't like this, and, you know, at every level, the carbon markets, they are complicated. And I think this is where you now have a role, because when you see the major buyers of carbon credits, they're typically your big multinational, you know, car manufacturing companies like Volkswagen, and the carbon markets are this mechanism, whether it's the voluntary carbon market or the compliance market, where compliance market, it's like country by country. As Zimbabwe, we are literally giving up our ability to claim certain emission reduction activities and selling it to a country that will never meet its emission reduction targets, but it helps, again, drive financial flows and assists in implementation. And even at that level, the carbon markets are pretty high level. So how do you get this global market and bring in farmers that are typically operating at a localized level, dealing with local markets? And this is where you now have a bridge, which is the carbon project developer. And this is where the carbon project developer, they assist in rapidly accelerating. And one thing the carbon markets have done is they facilitate the rapid acceleration, and they've assisted in funding innovation and bridging the gap between the research into actual practical implementation on the ground. And now for, you know, things like the Kenya Carbon Markets Conference, through the Carbon Markets Project, through the monitoring, reporting, and verification, it helped facilitate increased access to information and data, which allowed farmers to make data-driven decision-making. And with the typical carbon project, is typically long-term, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. The carbon markets aren't going to be forever. You can leverage that to facilitate systems change or a transition to something, because after a 10-year project, you know, if you reach a point where you've got optimal levels of soil organic carbon, there is no additionality. But it can, in the short term, open up the medium to long-term funding that is required to make certain changes within a process, within production, that can result in emissions reduction. So things like food loss waste, you can leverage the carbon markets. We know that for every kilogram of tomatoes, the emissions factor of the methane that's released. You know, if you know, there's different types of methodology that can be applied, but soil organic carbon by itself is not commercially viable. And this is where the business sector now needs to leverage off the research center to say, okay, we have a market-based mechanism under the UNFCCC. You know, we now have the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, the Global Biodiversity Framework, and we know that we have a red species. We know that we have low levels of biodiversity in the soils. How do we heal that ecosystem? And this is where business needs to, and policy as well, needs to be informed by the academia and research, where you inform us that what are the matrices that we measure? How do we establish the baselines? Then the financial sector now comes in, the economic sector, the economists now come in and they say, okay, this is how you can structure a market so that a farmer can be compensated for taking activities to enhance the biological diversity. These are the agreed upon standards or matrix for us to measure. But for a farmer, they don't need to know all that. They just need to know, these are the steps I need to take. This is what I need to do. This is how much money I can make from this. Or in the short term, and then in the medium to long term, this is how this is going to affect my yield. This is how this is going to affect, how I can reduce my need for buying, putting inputs, fertilizers. If the soil is healthy, then the natural immune system of a plant is also going to be healthy. So your requirement for pesticides is now reduced. So I think we need to be looking and saying, the project developers can assist in bridging, from research to practical application on the ground, but also contextualizing and taking the global billions in commitment through things such as the voluntary carbon market, payment for ecosystem services to the farmer to drive the behavioral change, but also help get the billions aggregate, because a single farmer isn't going to be able to go to Volkswagen. You need a few hundred farmers to 1,000 farmers, depending on the area of lands. So the aggregation of the funding, the aggregation of the impact, but now you can leverage private sector to assist in extension service at no cost to public sector. So thank you very much for that. Sorry, that was a long explanation.
No, it was not long at all. In fact, I would have loved to give you even additional 2 minutes to elaborate further, because I really like the point you made that the carbon market is safe. What you can get from that carbon should not be a reason to invest, because you may not get something that is tangible from that carbon credit you get. But the system change you have induced is where you get the most. And the reason I said you needed 2 additional minutes, I really like your story, and I can't tell it on your behalf because I will not be able to tell it correctly, about how farmers who have adopted, who have embraced the carbon market, have been able to be more resilient to others when you refer to the El Nino phenomena you had in Southern Africa.
So sorry.
Yeah.
In my country, in Zimbabwe, we have one of the longest running carbon projects called the Kariba Red Project. So it's a red project mainly focused on forestry, but as part of that carbon project, and I think this is where it's quite interesting that we need to, number one, the farmer is the core client, and everyone is serving the needs of the farmer, whether you are working in research or as a project developer, as civil society. And civil society is also important because when it now comes to contracts, sometimes you need an independent third party that can explain to a farmer that this is what you're signing up to. And in certain instances, as I said, carbon, we don't have a word in any African language for carbon. But also, so in the Zimbabwean context, this carbon project, but project area included communities. And as part of the carbon project, the project developers identified certain bottlenecks that were inhibiting and affecting. So in addition to deforestation in their project area, they had people that were involved in riverbed cultivation. So they moved them to, they relocated where they were doing their agricultural practices. And the reason people were doing the riverbed cultivation, number one, water's close, so it's easier to water your crop. And number two, the soils were very poorly degraded. It's agroecological zone 4 in my country, poor soils, water not around. And they started using, integrated this and leveraged carbon financing to, number one, invest in conservation agriculture. A lot of countries in Africa, we don't have government subsidies to help farmers shift to regenerative agriculture practices. Then they dealt with the bottleneck number 2. The riverbed cultivation, one of the drivers was water's close. So they used carbon financing to drill boreholes. Then, engaging with the communities, saying, this is your percentage of the carbon project. This is your reward for moving your production, not cutting down the trees. They sort of came into an agreement that we will run this carbon project, but as a community, this is how you benefit. And they had a very extensive stakeholder consultation. So over the project life cycle, over 10 years, they helped farmers transition to conservation agriculture. Then in addition to that, they helped increase access to irrigation, solar powered irrigation, then moved to more efficient, water efficient irrigation. So from, using a bucket and a watering can, they put in drip irrigation lines. So you can start to see how carbon financing can be catalytic. This carbon project isn't going to go forever, but it's already resulted in 4 main behavioral changes for farmers. And it's very significant now because in Zimbabwe, similar to Malawi and Zambia, we are seeing 50, we've got an El Nino induced drought, and we've seen crop failures of 50 to 70% with crops like maize. When you see the level of resilience that has come from 10 years of investing in the soil, the results speak for themselves. Number one, this community is food secure. They're actually selling to their neighbors, and they're starting to drive, people are saying, okay, I don't want to be like that. So now you're starting to see other adopters now coming in and saying that works, and asking them, how did you get to that point? So that's some of the catalytic behavioral change, increase to access to information. And now, for this community, they were focusing on RED+, but it's interesting. It will be interesting now to bring in additional access to information and data to investigate it at the soil level. What has been the change in the soil organic carbon, the cation exchange capacity, and also the biological activity? These were poorly degraded soils. And then when you now have a market-based mechanism and you can bring the carbon market and the biodiversity credit market, this is one way we can also now facilitate financial inclusion, because even if a farmer is not exporting and you've aggregated your farmers, they're now generating a unit that is certified, that can be sitting in a registry in a safer jurisdiction, such as, America or Switzerland, and you're now facilitating. It's a novel way of driving increased access to finance for smallholder farmers. And in the Zimbabwean case, these were smallholder female farmers with no security of land tenure in a country with a high level of hyperinflation. And they managed to get access to foreign direct investment. So when I say the carbon markets can be catalytic, they can be catalytic at both an environmental and a developmental perspective. Thank you.
Yes, this is really, thank you very much once again, because the carbon, there is all this we have seen, but we know it will be very, very critical in terms of feeding the soil biology. No carbon, there is no way you can sustain soil biology enough. There is no way. Then it also contributes to water retention, as Rashid was telling us earlier. For some people have been fortunate to have significant level of organic matter. You can easily be resilient. It may be challenging to dry lands, but at least there is actions that can be taken. Yeah, having said that, now I want to give the 1 minute to other colleagues to be able to. Oh, you are missing the most important part, my brother. We know these things happen, so no worries. Okay, sorry. So these are some of the complicated, there is always constraints in life. We need to cope with them. Carbon storage is one of those. So having said that, really giving you the floor in terms of what do you think needs to be done in a certain way to enhance the investment for soil health and biodiversity. We have gotten few examples. If there is anything that you can be able to add in one keyword, that would be appreciated.
Thank you. I think the one thing that I would consider is actually bringing soil science into that banner of environmental health and One Health, and looking at the health of the ecosystem, plant health, animal health, and also humanity welfare, and making that a part of it so it raises the profile. Because at the moment we see One Health is just about and animal health and human health. But actually, that's not right. It's actually much broader than that. We need to think, sorry, we need to think about the environment as a whole and how it sustains everything else. And therefore, from that purpose, soil is critically important, because if you don't stabilize it, you're not going to maintain your microorganisms, you're not going to maintain the fungi and the other elements of the diversity.
Excellent. I agree with you that I try to promote soil health, especially the environmental aspects of it, because on top of that, the quality of soil will even inform the really how healthy we are. When you grow crops on depleted soils, what we can expect is you are just eating. It looks like food, but it's unhealthy food because it is not providing you with the essential nutrients you need. So that's one excellent example. Rashid, anything you would also like to share?
I think the issue is now coming in the ground because, you know, as soil scientists, since years, no one care about. I have a lot of friends working on other discipline, and soil for them was just something, no, it's not really important. Just when it's come to climate change, when they include it as one of the carbon sink, is that soil could be, after the ocean, the most carbon sink. And we put it in the agenda. And now we heard that it's also part of the biodiversity conventions. And that's make that, I think, as community, we need to go with, I think, several track. First track is, yes, I fully agree with you. We need to have some simple message to decision makers. You will not go to decision maker asking, we need funding, but we need to get this data, but you have to wait 10 years before that we can show you some impact, because this is long-term trials and things. And that's a track that we need to do without making a lot of, can I say, noise. We have to do it as science community. We can try to catch funding from some donors, but government, no. We have to go with them with sample message. We need to do that. That we can prove that it's carbon sequestration. There's most of the countries signed commitment for climate actions, and we have to sell this as one solution for climate actions. Sequester carbon, you are doing your commitment on carbon actions, climate actions. Second is also to put it in simple way, that because the policy agenda is several times very few years. I give you the example, 1 million hectare. I personally said it to the Minister of Agriculture, saying you can see the evidence quickly in 5 years. If I go, I say, no, we need to wait because of that, they will not accept. And this kind of track need to be done with policymakers, simple message. Another track is to go to do more deep work, deep science. We are start on this biological working, which is new. There is a lot of, you say, well, Deborah, that need multidisciplinary. We need to work with biotechnological guys, not only all soil science. The DNA that we did it with the US university, because don't have capacity, but we move with them and we share. And it's something also that we need to do to show this result. And after that, we go to carbon credit. And this is another track where we need to be more proactive, more aggressive, because by the end, this is the same smallholder farm, this is the same land, and they are always keep under this threat of drought. We need to make them resilient by bringing some funding, as my colleague said, and this needs to be beyond your comfort zone. You have to go to negotiate, and don't come with this monitoring system that asks for a lot of money. You need to develop some proxy. You know, if you go to the certificate with carbon credit, the cost of the analysis is more higher than the cost of the carbon credit. And that's also make a lot of problems. So we need to go to other tracks to get this finance using ecosystem services, as I said by my colleague, carbon credit, voluntary carbon credit. And we need to find a way how we can simplify the method of to collect this and soil health indicators. And I'm fully agree that we need to look to the holistic system, healthy soil, healthy food, healthy human. This is something that we are going with the POW, for example, and the Global Soil Partnership. We are saying that we need a decade of soil, and we are working with them to start, because it's need a lot of time if you want to adjust, rehabilitate soil if it's degraded. No. So I think three or four tracks need to be done, and partnership is the key of that. We need to work with civil society. We need to put the human in the center, no soil. Soil shouldn't be the center. Should be human is the centric of what we are doing, because we need to make these farmers resilient, not soil to be resilient. Yeah, it's something, you know, we need to focus farmers, but if you make these farmers in your centric effort, by sea, the soil will be resilient. And if soil is resilient, the human is resilient. And that's how we can also manage these actions. Because my former professor was working a lot on soil mapping, but no one now wants to find a soil map. Why I have to do soil map? Why I have given you this? But if you say no, if you do this, because you will increase the yield of the farmers, because the farmers will be more resilient, you know, you have to change your message if you want to get funded for this kind of the work. Thank you.
Misbehaving. Yeah, no, it needs to negotiations. Yeah, that's fundraising. It takes a kind of negotiations. Yes, we can move to the slides. Elizabeth, I want to give you the floor to tell us a bit in terms of the grant competition we put on the slides. Yeah, yes. In fact, I forgot to use the technology. You can stand, Elizabeth, to be able to watch the screen.
Thank you. See you at the end. Oh, thank you, Cargill. No, thank you for the opportunity to take part in the panel session, and also to announce the research grant competition for the Global Centre on Biodiversity for Climate. This is a new program that's just been established as of last year. We're now entering the third grant competition. It's an annual competition, and this week we've announced the themes for the competition. The competition doesn't officially open until February, when there will be an invitation to apply pack available with details on the concept note, etc. And there will be a 6-week opening period for those concept notes to be submitted. Then they will be evaluated, and those that are successful will be invited to submit full project proposals. One thing I didn't mention previously is at the other launch, Cargill, is the finance of it. We are looking for projects that range from 100,000 to 1 million is the grants that are available. Obviously, those are tailored to the types of projects. So it means that you can look at policy evidence research or large field-based projects, or even scaling out from one region to another. So there are two themes. One is about using biodiversity for climate resilience in agricultural, food, and bioeconomy value chains. And that's looking particularly at nature-based solutions that help to bring biodiversity back into production landscapes. So soil biodiversity is an element of that. And it's about reducing poverty and about boosting climate resilience. The GCBC is an ODA-funded program from the UK government, which means that we are limited in the focus countries to those that are on the ODA eligible list, but we do cover all 3 main focus regions: Latin America and the Caribbean, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Southeast Asia and Pacific. In addition, we also cover the small island developing states, both in the Caribbean and the Pacific. And so all the focus regions are eligible to bid into Theme 1. And then this time, for the first time, we've got Theme 2, which is very much focused on the small island developing states, looking at the challenges that are very island context specific in terms of the high endemic biodiversity that they often have, but also the challenges that they're facing with climate change and what that means. And we're hoping that from testing some of the solutions within the SIDS, this will also help to inform and scale out solutions to other parts of the region. You
Something's going with technology, but fine.
try again. Yes, next one. That's it. Yeah. Thank you. So there are really 4 key elements for any project that bids into the grant competition. One is that they address the nexus. So it's about climate resilience, it's about biodiversity, both conservation and management and use, and then it's about improved livelihoods and in particular poverty. So projects must focus on that nexus. They must also be innovative, so have innovation in both the approach, whether that's technology, the way, the methodology, the frameworks, etc. And they must work with interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary. So they must bring in both natural, social, and economic science and work very closely with partners and stakeholders. That's important. And they must have a systems approach. So you'll see here, there's 2 main sort of sub-themes. One is the innovative nature-based solutions, and that's working with communities, businesses, and micro SMEs, both, and it covers a broad range. It covers terrestrial, freshwater, or coastal ecosystems. And then the second aspect is very much how you apply the systems approach to inform large-scale transformative change. So that's really looking at novel policy interventions, both at local, subnational, and national scale. And a part of the program is really gathering the evidence in to understand what the projects are finding, but also to build that evidence across different clusters and help to inform change more broadly. So thank you. If there's any questions, happy to answer those. Yeah, one at the back.
Hi, yes, my name is Fatah Jeng from the Gambia. I just had a question about the proposal that you have for the development of innovative nature-based solutions.
Yep.
So I know you're targeting businesses and communities as well as indigenous peoples, but I just wanted to get confirmation whether this is also open to NGOs, that is the
Yes.
non-governmental organizations that are working at the grassroots level.
Yes, if you follow the QR code, I have put a poster outside. It'll take you to the GCBC website, and they have put up on there what organizations that are eligible to apply, and NGOs and international UN funded agencies are also able to apply to that. Yeah. The only thing we're not allowed to do under the terms of the ODA funding is fund PhDs.
Okay, thank you so
But
much.
postdocs we can fund.
Oh, that's
So
nice.
when Deborah's finished her PhD, she can be part of a project.
That's nice to hear. Unfortunately, you don't fund PhD projects, but an additional question, especially for the funding for non-governmental organizations as well. So just wanted to ask, is it going to be the same application process? Because we've understand how it could be very rigid, especially with traditional funding models, especially for young people and NGOs in the global south. So is there any way that, for instance, if young people in these particular countries are actually interested to apply, to maybe see how the application process can be made more flexible or easier for these NGOs to actually apply, so that at least they could benefit from this funding? Because sometimes funding or donors actually require lots of documentations that sometimes these NGOs can't really prove, even though they've done so many great work. So it'd be good to also look at that as well, especially to encourage more of the NGOs and these global south countries to also benefit from the funding.
Yeah, the first grant competition we had was based on full proposals. We then adopted it to a two-stage process and simplified the concept note to make it easier for partners to put forward their ideas and what they thought would make a good project. And then those that had the relevant ideas, the innovative solutions, as they were asked to develop full proposals, there was a series of webinars which were hosted by DAI Global, who manage the funds, to help support those applicants and to think how they then put together a full proposal. So we've been trying to look at what mechanisms there are to help strengthen capacity of those that are applying. But that comes in at the full proposal stage. So it's really at the concept note stage. Have you got an idea? Is it innovative? Does it meet the criteria? And can you articulate that to show what difference it will make for your beneficiaries? And then how are you going to leverage the evidence, the data, because that's a critical part of it. It's got to be scientific. You've got to be able to show how you're using science to make that difference.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Great. Thank you very much for the question. I don't know anything about the grant, but I will tell you the secret. She can share how much she can share, but there is a secret. It will have to be a solid, it will have to be competitive. So one of the things you need as a secret, and we talked about it in the panel, in terms of partnership.
Yes.
How do you make sure that you, as you develop your network, all the way from the Gambia to Riyadh, it's a clear indication that there is a network, there is partnership, and we are meeting other new potential partners to do this kind of work. Make sure that to get a competitive proposal, you team up with others, but make sure that they acknowledge your comparative advantage. I mean, in the team. That is the secret. And
you're absolutely right.
Yes. So with this, thank you very much. And we probably need to. Because it's not all that easy to get the information before the call is out. In majority of the cases, you get the call when there is only 10 days left, and to bring it together, a consortium becomes a challenge. So I think, Elizabeth, I won't eat too much of your time. If there is something else you want to add, you can add. Otherwise, we can think about the concluding remarks of this session.
Just one thing to add, Kagile, and it is the reason that we've announced the themes now is to give people more time to think about their ideas and who their partners are, because otherwise it is, as you said, Cargill, a real challenge trying to pull that together in the short time scales. So thank you again.
Great, thank you very much. Have a seat wherever you want. Yeah, thanks very much. This was a quite interesting session, building on another session that we just had here, which was referring to drought and resilience. Then we have the soil health. The soil health is very, very critical for drought resilience, whether we want it or not. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the panelists I will not want to name each of you because I have said it in the beginning, but really to acknowledge the level of commitment running from one session to another. It's not an easy task, especially that the traveling distance. Here we are on a 40 hectares area. So thank you very much for everyone who has been able to make it. On behalf of the panelists, I want to thank everyone who was here in the audience, because it's very painful when you are a panelist and you are talking to yourself. So when there is an audience, you celebrate. So thank you very much, and I'd like to clap for you. So this is for me. I like to organize this, and thanks for Deborah. She put most of this session together for us. And I like really to use this opportunity to create the kind of network that we need, being for proposal development, but also for implementing the research we do at CGIAR. We are here. This is the CGIAR pavilion, or they call it the Food and Agriculture Pavilion. But when they don't mention CGIAR, you may look for it and don't find it. So it's a CGIAR, but it's for food and agriculture. And to make it a food pavilion, we are having a small reception right now. Please be part of it. It's for everyone who's around, so be part of it. You are the champions for today. And just to conclude, really wishing for opportunities for us to team up, to continue collaborating. And I would like to invite everyone here to be part of our family photo, assuming that those who take photos are around. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, please come. Don't go before you join our family photo. You are part of this family. And when we look for partners to watch the proposal, we may take the before people start leaving.
Work you were referring to, because Hughes did a breakdown in Mexico, but doing research first, and now looking at carbon credits and options to convince their government to help farmers adopt the practices.
Farmers need help. England used to have a payment for ecosystem service that would like farmers
Excellent presentation, very informative. Hello, madam. Good, how are you? Yes, I'm from the Gambia.
Yes, so thank you very much.
The thinking about one was a red plus project, so the work on soil was next to negligible. So now it's trying to be like, okay, well, transitioning farmers.